Deaths in Glenmorach Manor, a fiction novel. Written by Shirley, read by Sir Lawrence Olivier. This audiobook was narrated using synthetic voice technology provided by 11 Labs. Chapter 25. The face that was revealed was one he hadn't expected. Peter Jenkins? Anthony murmured in profound shock. We brought Peter upstairs and sat him there on the kitchen floor. He was a worker at Lord Wallace's vineyard, a quiet man, someone who had always seemed to keep to himself. But now there he was, the one who had been feeding Anthony, the one who had played a part in this grim game. Anthony's face twisted in confusion. Peter? Why? What is this all about? Peter blinked rapidly, the fear in his eyes unmistakable. I don't know anything, young Master Anthony. Please spare me, he stammered, his voice shaking. I was just told to bring food and water for you. I wasn't involved in the kidnapping, I swear. I raised an eyebrow, my patience wearing thin. Who told you to feed him, Peter? Who's behind this? Peter's eyes darted around the room, desperate, as if he were searching for some way out of this. I can't tell you, sir. If I do, he'll kill my family. I have no choice. I narrowed my eyes. Who are you protecting, Peter? If you don't tell me, I'll have to take you to Inspector Harris. And trust me, you don't want to be on his radar. Peter's face went ashen. You don't understand. I can't. I slammed my hand on the old wooden table beside me. What I understand now is you are protecting a criminal. I assure you that the consequences will not be pretty. You must tell me now. Who's behind this? His eyes flickered with indecision, and for a moment I thought he might break. But then he shook his head, the weight of his decision settling on his shoulders. No, I can't do it. You don't know what he's capable of. He'll kill them all, and it won't matter if I'm in jail or not. My family comes first. Then why did you agree to work for him? I put him under pressure. I wanted to know the reason. I owe him money, sir. A lot of money, and I have no idea how I'm going to pay it back. He cried. I'm not a bad person, sir. I never do anything to harm anybody. You must believe me, sir. The reason put forward by Peter softened my heart. But as a detective, I must not be so easily influenced by emotions. But I knew I had to stay calm. We can keep your family safe, Peter, but you need to trust me. You need to tell me who this is. But Peter was unyielding. He refused to speak, his lips pressed tightly together, as if the very mention of the kidnapper's name would seal his fate. Who owns this cabin? Who's behind this, Peter? His gaze dropped to the floor. He whispered, It's not mine. I don't know who owns this house. All I know is that I was told to come here twice a day to bring food and water for the young Master Anthony. So, the person who paid you to do this, the kidnapper, does not live here. I kept pushing him with relentless questions. I don't think so, sir. Every time I come here to bring food for the young master, this cabin is empty. John whispered in my ear. Mate, based on everything we've found here, I don't think this house is being used as a regular home. It seems like a place used to hide and store evidence of the owner's crimes. I could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on me. I knew I needed to get more out of him, but Peter was locked in his fear, a man trapped by terror. I said, lowering my voice, Think carefully. You're out of options, Peter. If you don't tell me, I'll have to take you in. His eyes flickered with a final flash of resolve. I'm not protecting a criminal, sir. I'm protecting my family. My family will die if I say his name. I sighed, frustrated. There was nothing more I could do. Peter had made his choice, and in the end it was one that would cost him dearly. I glanced down at him, who was still struggling to break free from his own fear, as he sat on the kitchen floor, bound and trembling. His hands were still tied behind his back, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I paced slowly before him, my thoughts racing. Peter, I need the truth. Did you strike Robert Wallace in the head in the cellar yesterday morning? His eyes widened, and he flinched as though he had been slapped. His breath hitched in his throat, and for a moment I thought he might collapse under the weight of his guilt. Anthony, standing nearby, was staring at Peter with a mixture of disbelief and confusion. His voice cracked slightly. The worry was evident in his eyes. What? Was Robert struck in the cellar? How is he now? Is he all right? Did he survive? John answered Anthony, his voice calm and reassuring. Robert's fine, Anthony. He's resting in the manor, receiving proper treatment from Dr. Sutherland. It was a blow to the head, but he's recovering well. No permanent damage, thank God. The relief that washed over Anthony's face was palpable, but it didn't seem to erase the fear or confusion. His voice barely a whisper. He asked, "But why would anyone do that to Robert?" I turned back to Peter, narrowing my eyes.
Peter?
I ask again, did you strike Robert Wallace? I repeated, my tone sharp. Peter's face twisted with a kind of terrified denial. No, I didn't. I swear I didn't. I studied him closely, but there was something in his voice. Something that didn't sit right. I leaned closer, pressing him again. And tell me, Peter, do you know who did it? The man's body trembled under the intensity of my gaze, and his eyes darted to the floor. Finally, with a shaking nod, he whispered, "Yes, but I can't tell you. If I do, he'll kill my family." All right. So, we now know that the man who attacked Robert in the cellar was also the one who kidnapped Anthony, wasn't he, Peter? I forced him to answer me. Peter nodded frantically. That's all the information I can give you. Please don't push me anymore if you want my family to live. Just put me in jail. I deserve it. I caught a desperation in his answer. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. And for a moment it felt as though the room itself had fallen silent, but I didn't give up. Peter, even if I bring you to Inspector Harris, he's still going to make you say the name. You can't stay silent. Lives are at stake. I said, my voice soft but insistent. Peter looked like he was on the verge of breaking down. His lips quivered as he desperately shook his head. I can't. I have a wife and a newborn child. If I tell you, they'll die. I moved away from him, pacing again as I processed everything he'd said. Then I stopped in my tracks and turned back to Peter. Did you stab Alan Faulkner, the horse trainer, in the vineyard? I asked bluntly. Anthony's face twisted in shock. What? Alan was stabbed. Why? Why are all of this madness happening to us? The question hung heavily in the room. Peter's face drained of color, his eyes wide with panic. No. I didn't do that either. I didn't hurt anyone. He swallowed hard, his voice breaking. I was pushing him with more questions. Do you know who did it? Was it the same person whose name you refused to tell us? Peter just nodded repeatedly. His body trembled. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, but I kept my composure. Now show me your right leg, I commanded him. Peter hesitated, and I saw the beads of sweat form on his forehead. He slowly rolled up his pant leg, revealing clean, unmarked skin. No signs of injury or blood. Nothing. I looked at his leg carefully, but I couldn't find anything that would tie him to the crime. It was clear that Peter hadn't been wounded recently. Perhaps he truly was telling the truth. Do you know whose pants these are? I asked, pulling out a torn pair of long pants from the pile of clothes John had found hidden in the cabin's closet. Peter's eyes immediately darted to the pants, and he shook his head quickly. Those aren't mine. I forced him to answer, leaning in close to his face. Then who owns these? Peter didn't answer right away. He looked down at the floor, struggling for words. I don't know, sir. I don't know anything about those pants. I wasn't convinced. But before I could push further, John interrupted. He said softly, Mate, ask him about the bloody blade. He pulled out a plastic bag with a fresh blood-stained blade inside, its sharp edge glistening even in the dim light. Peter's face went ashen the moment he saw it. His body trembled violently, and his eyes grew wide with terror. No, please. I didn't use that knife. I moved in close, my anger flaring. Do you recognize this blade, Peter? This blade was used to stab Alan Faulkner, wasn't it? Peter let out a strangled sob, and I could see the tears welling in his eyes. I didn't stab anyone. I was just asked to remove it from the vineyard. He was shaking now, his words coming in broken sobs. Please, I'm begging you, sir. I've done nothing. I'm just trying to protect my family. I stepped back, my frustration reaching its peak. Then who stabbed Alan Faulkner? Tell me, Peter. Was he the same person who struck Robert Wallace in the cellar? I slammed my hand on the table in front of him, the noise loud enough to echo through the cabin. Peter trembled even more, his mind beginning to collapse under the relentless barrage of questions attacking him. Tears fell freely down his face as he whispered through his sobs. Please have mercy on me, sir. If you also have a family, you will understand. Please, I can't. I could see the agony in his eyes, the kind of desperation no man should ever have to bear. He wasn't lying. He was terrified, and I believed him. After all, he was only protecting his family with all the strength he had. Peter could only sob, his voice barely audible. Please just take me to the police. I'll go to prison. I'll accept whatever punishment you give me, but you must not know his name from me. I stood there, my mind whirling as I processed his confession. There was something about Peter's fear, something in the raw terror in his eyes that made me pause. Part of me wanted to believe him, to trust that he was telling the truth, but the nagging question still remained. Who was the shadow pulling the strings? We're running out of time, mate. We need to bring him to Inspector Harris before more of them come to ambush us in this place. John reminded me to leave the cabin immediately as he felt it was unsafe for us to stay there too long. I looked down at Peter one last time, my decision clear. We'll take you to Inspector Harris, I said softly, my voice heavy with the weight of the truth yet to come. But deep inside, I knew that the man who had orchestrated all of this was still out there, lurking in the shadows, and the hunt for him had only just begun. Wait a minute, John. I need to get something from the basement, I told him while we were all preparing to leave the cabin. While hiding in the underground basement earlier, something caught my attention. A suspicious plastic bag that instantly piqued my curiosity. Unable to resist, I grabbed the bag and opened it. What I discovered inside left me utterly speechless. Part 2. The trip to Inspector Harris's office had been a quiet one, the weight of the evidence pressing down on all of us. Peter Jenkins sat beside me, his hands still bound, had been sullen and silent, a broken man who seemed to shrink into himself with each passing minute. Anthony, sitting in front of me, his face was drawn with worry, his eyes distant as he gazed out the carriage window, lost in thought. He was clearly still troubled by the day's revelations, by the depth of the conspiracy that had unfolded around his family. I, too, was deep in thought. The items I had found in the basement kept replaying in my mind. The brown suede jacket, with more dried bloodstains at the cuff of the right sleeve, and a piece of cloth that was also marked with dried blood. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were getting closer to the truth, but it remained just out of reach. The pieces of the puzzle were scattered, but they didn't fit together. There was something about those items that bothered me. As the carriage rumbled down the cobbled streets toward the inspector's office, I thought back to the brown suede jacket. Whoever owned it, they were close to this case. The blood stains around the wrist area of the right sleeve of the jacket didn't appear to be recent. In fact, the dried blood seemed to be more than a week old. Had it been from Benjamin Wallace's murder? Or was it from Rosie's tragic death? And the most surprising thing was what I found in the pocket of that suede jacket. I was very certain of what I was thinking in my mind. The possibility of revealing the owner of that jacket was very close. I hoped the test results would support my assumption. Upon arrival at Inspector Harris's office, we were greeted by the gruff man himself, who stood behind a large wooden desk, cluttered with papers. His brow furrowed as he glanced up at us, then down at Peter Jenkins, who was being led to a seat by two constables. Harris's voice was rough, but there was a keen edge to it as he motioned for us to come forward. "Ernest, what's this all about?" "You've got quite a collection of evidence here," he said when I placed all the evidence on his desk. While I spoke with Inspector Harris, I asked John and Anthony to sit in the waiting room. I presented the evidence we had gathered from the cabin. The blood-stained blade that glimmered faintly, the pair of torn pants, the brown suede jacket with a small bottle in its pocket, suspected to contain poison, and a piece of cloth. Each item was meticulously arranged for Harris to examine. These were found in the cabin where we caught Peter Jenkins. "We need all these to be tested as soon as possible, Inspector." Harris nodded, eyeing the contents of the bag with a keen interest. "I'll have my men look over it." Peter Jenkins was just a cog in the machine, a pawn being used to cover up a much larger plot. But who was orchestrating it all? That was the question that haunted me. Before I left Peter in Harris's custody, I asked the inspector for one more favor. "Inspector, there's another piece of evidence I need access to. It was something found when Rosie was discovered dead. A piece of fabric from the barbed wire fence under Robert's balcony." Harris paused, his expression darkening. "Okay, just wait a minute." He waved for one of the constables to fetch the small bundle from the evidence room. It didn't take long for the constable to return with a small envelope containing the fabric. As I unfolded it, I noticed the familiar texture, the same rough weave as the torn pants we had found in the cabin. My pulse quickened as I held them up side by side. The matching fibers were undeniable. The fabric from the barbed wire fence and the torn pants was the same. I turned to Inspector Harris, who was watching me closely. How could that even be possible? What a great discovery, Ernest. They matched," he whispered. I could see his confusion, but the facts were in front of us now, irrefutable. "Inspector, I believe whoever was involved in Rosie's death, whoever killed Benjamin, is connected to this. Whoever wore these pants is someone close to the Wallaces, and they've been trying to cover their tracks." Our minds were racing as we attempted to piece the puzzle together after the realization, which astounded us both. However, why would someone in the Wallace? I shook my head. I don't have all the answers yet, but I do know this. We're closer than ever to uncovering the truth. Inspector Harris asked me, "Do you have someone in your mind, Ernest?" I nodded grimly and said, "I think I do." Harris seemed deep in thought as he ran his fingers over his beard, his gaze never leaving the evidence before him. Finally, he gave a short, sharp nod. "We'll do the tests for all this evidence as soon as possible." As we left Harris's office and made our way back to Glenmorach Manor, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing at the edge of something much bigger than just a series of murders and attacks. There were connections here, connections that reached into the very heart of the Wallace family. And someone, somewhere, was watching our every move, ensuring that their secrets stayed buried. The truth was closer than ever, but so was the danger. The familiar scent of Glenmorach Manor greeted us as we arrived. The manor stood in front of us, its towering stone facade as imposing as ever. But today it seemed quieter, more solemn. Anthony, visibly relieved, was the first to disembark from the carriage. His eyes were focused and determined, but there was an underlying tension in his expression. Before I could even speak to him, he was already heading towards the grand entrance of the manor. "I need to speak with my uncle," he called back over his shoulder, his voice filled with both urgency and a strange sense of finality. John and I exchanged glances, but said nothing as we followed Anthony inside. The grand halls of the manor, usually a place of welcoming warmth, felt colder now. We could hear the faint murmur of voices coming from Lord Wallace's study, and without hesitation, Anthony pushed open the door and stepped inside. Lord Wallace was sitting behind his desk, a pile of documents scattered before him, his face marked with the weariness of recent events. The lines on his face deepened as he looked up to see his nephew standing in the doorway. Anthony's arrival seemed to lift his spirits, but there was still something faintly grim in the air between them.
Anthony, I'm so glad you're safe. I've been worried sick about you.
Anthony nodded, walking toward his uncle and embracing him. I'm sorry, Uncle. I know I've caused you great worry. I've been held captive, but I'm all right now, thanks to Mr. Owen and Mr. Barnett. Anthony spoke with teary eyes. Lord Wallace's gaze hardened for a brief moment as the news of Anthony's abduction seemed to settle back into his mind. But then, just as quickly, his face softened again. It's over now. You're here. That's what matters. After exchanging a few more words with his uncle, Anthony left the study and made his way up to the east wing of the manor, where his mother, Lady Lucy, awaited him. The relief on her face was unmistakable when she saw her son, her arms wide open to embrace him. Oh, Anthony, my dear son, I feared the worst when you disappeared. I couldn't bear it. Lady Lucy cried, her voice trembling with emotion. Anthony smiled faintly, his weariness giving way to a gentle comfort. I'm all right, Mama. I'm home. They shared a quiet, heartfelt moment as mother and son reunited. Anthony stayed there for a while, allowing his mother's love to ease his troubled mind before he headed back to the main house where Robert was recovering from his own ordeal in the cellar. Meanwhile, John went back to his room to freshen up, while I, without stopping by my room to change clothes or remove my gloves and shoes, decided to visit Alan, who was still recovering at the time. I made my way through the narrow hallways toward the servants' quarters where he was staying. As I approached the door, I could hear soft voices within. I knocked lightly, waiting for an answer before entering. Mrs. Thompson, the head of the servants, was standing near the bed, adjusting the blankets while Alan lay propped up against the pillows. She looked up as I entered, giving me a brief but polite nod. Mr. Owen, she greeted me warmly. How is Alan feeling today? I asked, moving toward the bed where Alan lay, his face pale but steadily improving from his injuries. Alan looked up at me, a faint smile on his lips, despite the exhaustion written in his eyes. Before Mrs. Thompson said anything, he answered me. Better than before, sir. He replied hoarsely, his voice still rough from the wound, the pains easing off. I think I'll be ready to head back home in a few days. Before I could respond, Mrs. Thompson, who had been silent up until now, stepped forward. She was replacing and adjusting Alan's bandages gently but firmly, offering her advice in a voice that left little room for argument. I think it would be better for Alan to remain here for a few more days, sir. He's still weak. I glanced at Alan, who seemed to be in disagreement. I think Mrs. Thompson's right. It's probably best if you stay here for a little longer. We wouldn't want your recovery to be rushed. I spoke to Alan while handing him a glass of water. Alan sighed but nodded. I'm no fan of staying in bed all day, but I suppose I have no choice, he said with a wry smile. Then I asked Alan, now that you're feeling better, I hope you can remember more of what happened in the vineyard when you were attacked. Did you see the face of the person who attacked you, or perhaps heard the person's voice? Alan weakly shook his head, and with a faint voice he answered me. I don't remember anything, Mr. Owen. The man didn't say anything. I was attacked from behind. Then I was in so much pain at the moment, and I fell off on the ground, passed out. I'm sorry, sir. I can't give you any more useful information. I turned to leave the room. As I made my way back toward the main part of the manor, my thoughts wandered back to the earlier events in the small cabin. Peter Jenkins was crucial in uncovering the truth about Robert's and Alan's attacker, Anthony's kidnapping, and their connection to Benjamin and Rosie's murder. Why was the Wallace family being targeted so brutally? What was the real reason behind all the violence and disappearances? I would not stop until I uncovered the truth, no matter where it led. I hoped the tests on the evidence would give me the answers I needed. I was determined to uncover the real murderer and the mastermind behind the family's suffering.